Happy Friday, community! You know what day it is. Are you excited for our 7th class trio reveal? Okay. Yes. All right, so let's begin.
Greetings all. It is, of course, Friday.
Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th, yeah.
That's
We should
good.
have had a spooky reveal. See, you guys voted for the wrong, absolutely wrong trio, because this one isn't spooky at all.
No, well,
Not really. Well, maybe a little bit.
1 out of 3.
1 out of 3, yeah. 1 out of 3 is kind of spooky. But I think one of the other ones that's still in the wings, even spookier. So, it's Friday, and it's the 13th, and it's been actually a very good day here. Nothing has been unusually broken.
I'll say that, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, it's 3 o'clock, so we're almost done. So let's start with housekeeping stuff first. The store last night obviously went live. Thank you so much for all the backers who have, and some non-backers actually, who have bought swag at the store. It has worked out so far really, really well. Merch lines, tech has worked as intended, which is a scary thing to say in the MMO business. But so far so good. We are selling lots of hoodies, so I'm glad you guys love it. I like it too. And t-shirts and posters and all that. So far so good, folks. Just a reminder, this pre-sale is going to end no later than 2 weeks from now. We're going to be talking with Merchline and come up with the right date. We wanted to make sure the tech worked before we said, oh yes, the pre-sale will end on this day, because we want to give everyone an opportunity to buy. So remember, if you want to buy in the pre-sale, which means the lower prices and the bundling and stuff, please do it before the pre-sale ends, because once it ends, that's when we start printing the shirts and the hoodies and the posters. And there'll still be some left in inventory, but we are printing hopefully right away, because they got to get the stuff there by Christmas. Yeah, so keep that in mind. If you're going to buy something, buying before the pre-sale ends is absolutely... Oh, look, it's 3 o'clock. It's time for the ambulance on 66. So, yeah, pretty much right on time. So, absolutely, if you haven't gone to the store yet, check it out this weekend. I think you'll like I know you'll like what you'll see. Also, go to the forums. We have 3 or 4 topics under the Swag Store discussion thread. We're taking suggestions for other stuff. We're also looking for any feedback, on the store experience, which so far has been nothing but positive. We haven't seen anybody have any issues so far, which is great. Okay, I think that's it. Time for class reveal?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So, wow, okay. This one was by our standards a landslide. Over 100 votes separated the winners from the losers, or the winner from the losers. And E, I'm really sorry, you didn't make it. We all thought it was going to be E. Well, what was he? I don't want anyone to have a heart attack in Twitch. Yes, E is the winner. So let's reveal E, which is our support class.
Okay, so if you want to see this, go to the website. You can see CamelotUnchained.com, and under the Camelot Unchained tab, there is the classes. This is what E looks like beforehand in the silhouettes. And here they are, without the names, support class. And here they are with the names. Go ahead.
Okay, so obviously the support class. We've been talking about this before the Kickstarter, during the Kickstarter, that I wanted to have a support class that was, among other things, speed-oriented.
Oh, I forgot to have a reading break.
Well, we'll have a reading break in a second. So I was wondering why you said, okay, Mark, go.
Read fast.
So this is the support
class.
class.
They
This
can just
is
read it fast.
exactly the speed class. So, okay, cue the great bossa nova music, Genesee. read up on the speed class, and we'll just kind of sit here and wait for you to read it really, really quickly.
There you go. Read it quick. Very excited for the minstrel. Everyone pities the dark fool.
Oh.
Okay, you done? Yes, can someone post the link to the classes for those who need a little hand-holding here?
We don't do hand holding.
We didn't do that.
We don't, but apparently the chat wants to be rubbed. Alright, that's enough. That's enough reading.
Oh, the music is over.
Yes.
Oh, thank God. Yeah, we're going to have to come up with something else other than the bossa nova for the next
We have a
three.
composer.
We
Like
do have a
we would
composer.
think that we could. Yeah.
Come up with something really silly. We need. That's the thing. We have a great composer, or a great sound guy so far, as well audio guy. And I don't know if I want to ask him to do something that
It'll be
silly.
the ducks in some kind of melody. have
You
ducks.
just sent the ducks into the.
And we'll have quacking noises. For
We need some famous duck themed, composition to riff off. And I'm not sure there really is one. But anyway, let's get to the support class. So again, before the Kickstarter, during, after, blah, 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 been talking about having a speed-centric support class. And obviously we need a support class, and we wanted a speed boosting, and we wanted speed boosting abilities as well. Kind of necessary for a game that, after all, has no instant travel, limited fast travel, and a fair amount of distance between things.
Yep.
So I think we have done that. I think we've done this also in a very thematic way. I really like how these guys came out. I mean, obviously, Minstrel, Scald, and the Dark Fool all tied quite heavily to the lore of all three realms. Dark Fool, I bet, was a bit of a surprise.
That one might have been.
Yeah, and that's okay. It's all right to have a little bit of a twist. You can look it up. This is not a BSC thing out of my head that I just said, hey, let's do something called a Dark Fool. It actually exists. So let's talk about these guys. Let's start, of course, with the Arthurians and the Minstrel.
All right, so the Minstrel, as you probably would expect from all of the Arthurian classes that we've revealed so far, is a very tightly focused character. He's very tightly focused on his music, so you'll have a lot of different songs, and his core mechanic of shifting between different songs, having songs that sort of drop off in power over time and then power back up for your next use means that there's a highly rotational theme going on where you'll have to decide how long you want to play the current song and how much of that power drop off you're willing to tolerate before switching to something else, and figuring out what the optimal set of things to switch between is and how that evolves over time over the course of a changing situation. So that will be a fairly complicated set of requirements for you to deal with, and so his focus on songs means that that's really the only thing that he majorly has to worry about. He's not trying to hybridize into doing a whole bunch of different things and multitasking. He's really just trying to optimize his songs, trying to optimize his positioning so that he can affect people, remembering that these are speed classes that are fairly mobile and that our ranges in our game are fairly long, so you're not going to have 30, 40, 50 meter combat range. You're going to have realistic ranges for things like trebuchets and longbows and stuff. So being able to cover these ranges and being able to share these auras with characters that are fairly far away from each other as the situation demands is already going to be a fairly important and difficult task to maintain. So in addition to that, being able to play the right things at the right times, he's going to have quite a bit of stuff to worry about.
And not just those abilities, but as the motto says, they're going to have some regular combat ability as well. and this is a challenge for us every week and every month and every year, non-mirrored RPS design is more challenging. And when you're looking at a support class, we couldn't just give speed to one class, right? That would be unfair. So coming up with classes that have, the speed, but can do other things, so that they don't play the same, so they have other abilities, is quite a challenge.
Yeah, and I don't even really like calling them a speed class because it makes them sound much more like a one-trick pony, where it's just like, oh, this is just a speed bot. I'll just have this guy AFK, on my second machine or whatever. But no, they have a whole lot of mechanics. They have a lot of things that they have to worry about, and they have a lot of support capabilities that are besides just make everybody run fast.
Exactly. And that's something to keep in mind as you read through and get to the next reveal, which is, of course, the Dark Fool. So again, this is based on the mythology of, in our case, the TDD. He is not, unfortunately, I'm sure some people are asking for another name to the character and another character entirely, but he's not just a musician. He's not a musician in the way that the minstrel is.
Right, and so the Dark Fool, again with the TDD class themed, is just kind of a different basis and a sort of a different theme as far as this goes. He's not really as purely themed as the Arthurian character, as most of the TDD classes aren't. But he does have music, he has songs that he runs, but he also is heavily invested in shouts, and so his balance is more to do with playing a song, and then when he has to break from one song to another, what shouts does he want to put in between those, or when he wants to stop his song to do some of his shouts and then go back into starting that song again, is it going to be worth the startup cost to stop and then restart that in order to get some of those shouts in? And so he's going to have a sort of a very different balancing mechanic because he doesn't have the same, fall off and rebuild sort of weaving thing that the minstrel has going on. He has, this different intermittent shout mechanic that he has in place of that. So he's also going to be what I would say is sort of a balancing act going on. So he's not the kind of character that's especially is focused on just making your side really good and making the other side really bad just straight off like some of these other characters are. He's more of a balancer, so that he doesn't make you win as much as he makes you not lose. So it's going to be very advantageous to your group if you're in a bad situation to have this guy around, because he's going to help balance the situation back out. If you're already ahead and doing well, you're getting a lot of kills, your side is not taking a lot of damage, he's not going to be as useful to you because you're already doing well, and his thing is really trying to keep things in balance. And so if you're taking a lot of damage, if your group members are dying, he's going to boost you back up and help give you that edge to keep the fight close. So that's sort of a very different and interesting way that I think this guy plays, and helps contribute to the way the TDD classes just in general sort of work.
Exactly, and if you're in a 9-man and you've got sorry, yeah, sorry guys, but as Ben says, this again is a very different take on this sort of character. He's different from the minstrel. He's different from the next one, which of course we had to do it. Just had to, of course, the Scald.
Right.
Scald. Hey Max, what is it?
I think it's Scald.
Yeah, okay. Scald.
We're actually saying it right.
I know, it's shocking.
So yes, and so here we have another Viking class. The Scald, obviously from his description, doesn't even like using instruments. So that's already very different from the other two that, don't. The minstrel really relies heavily on instruments. The Dark Fool sort of can or cannot, depends on whether they want to. But the Scald really doesn't want to, and so he uses his voice primarily.
Well, and that's based on how it was
based
actually
on
in real
poetry.
life. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It wasn't based on mythology. It's actually based on what Scalds were in Viking society.
History, yeah.
Yeah, they weren't playing instruments. They weren't singing in how we consider singing. It was all about the words.
Right. And so they're sort of chants and sagas and things here. They're sort of classified as songs in the case of our game because it's sharing the same sort of mechanic of, this persistent aura that happens around you and affects your group members. but it's themed highly differently because they're not using these instrumental sort of effects. But what that means is because they're not using an instrument, their hands are free. And so, as with many of the other Viking characters, they have a lot more inclination towards melee weapons and melee attacks and contributing as sort of a fightery type of character. That doesn't mean that they're going to be as strong as a fighter. You know, you're not going to stand toe-to-toe with a fighter from another realm and really fight them very effectively, but if you need to get into that situation very briefly, or you're going to contribute as sort of an assist into that, or you're going to go up against somebody like a healer who doesn't have fighting skills hardly at all, you're going to be better in melee than they are for sure. So, and this is sort of the same thing we talked about with the Winter Shadow too, right? Where he has a shield, he really gets into melee more, and so Viking classes just sort of tend to do that overall. And so that's going to be a way that he sort of contributes more directly to the combat and is able to put up more of a fight, I think, than a lot of these other classes, even though he has very good and stable supporting mechanics as well. His mechanic, as far as his cycling and sort of weaving goes, is more of his persistence of effects beyond their durations. So if he has an effect going and he decides to change to another effect, the previous effect lasts overlapping that duration, so he can actually get multiple things going at once. He can't do that for very long or very often, but if he only sticks to, say, one song the entire time, he's missing out on the opportunity to get these intervals where he can actually be running multiple effects stacked on top of each other. So he's sort of balanced around that so that he really needs to take advantage of that to really maximize his effectiveness.
And again, if you look at this guy's play style, you look at the minstrel's play style, you look at the Dark Fool's play style, they're all different, just as we promised you folks. RPS and non-mirrored, and like all of our other classes, these are three more that are a good example of how to create non-mirrored RPS style classes that we believe are going to work really well for the game. Will be fun to play, strong thematically, and obviously contribute, whether it's to small group combat, even Zerg, based combat, as well as castle, and keep defense and attack.
Yeah, they have a very wide range of utility in these classes, along the same way as healers will be very important to having in your group. Having a support class to your group is also going to be very important. And then, obviously, having a good front line of, your fightery characters and being able to maintain some peeling and distancing and just all-out frontline DPS is going to be all very important things. So being able to, in this case, for support classes, they all sort of share the idea of making your group better, making the enemy group worse, getting rid of some of the bad things that are happening to your group that are inflicted on you by other enemy characters, and being able to inflict some negative things on the enemy that will make it harder for them to deal with the rest of your group members.
And not one-trick ponies.
Right.
Which
it's
is the
not
key.
Just like, these are not just speed bots. These
Exactly.
are characters that have a lot of functionality, that are going to have a very important role, and that you're going to want to actively play as a main character in order to really be effective as part of your group.
Exactly, and they're not squishy. They're not, these guys who just can go out, throw some buffs on you, throw some debuffs, and you look at it and you kill, like the rest of our classes. Some are
I
a
would
little
say
bit...
even mages aren't like that.
Exactly.
So these are going to be tougher than mages, I think, in most cases. They don't have as many of the heavier armor related penalties, so they can wear heavier armor.
Exactly.
Probably don't want to go too far into the heavy armor range, I would say. Probably not into the very upper high end like heavy fighters tend to go into, because they want to be very mobile. Even with their speed, they would offset that by having too heavy of armor on, but they'll probably wear reasonably heavy armor, and the fact that they especially in the Skald's case, using weapons will have a good anti-melee defense, just being able to get those deflections and stuff in.
Exactly. Okay, then time for questions, I think.
I think so.
Yeah, so questions.
Okay, Q&A time. Max is going to slow the chat here and keep your questions to the classes here that we're talking about. Go ahead. Will this class get the CC? Can you talk about, do they have any? They want to know.
Yeah, so this, I wouldn't say this is a control class, per se. Again, it's more to do with like buffs and debuffs and purging buffs and cleansing and doing those sorts of things. And it's not focused around just taking away the abilities of players to just do anything. they will have obviously a lot of effectiveness increasing and decreasing, but that's not the same as saying like hard control, like, and now no one may do anything, you know. So they will sort of take on a lot of that role that you might be familiar with from other games, where you have a guy who is really making it possible for you to do things that you couldn't do otherwise because you have this guy in your group who's able to lay out some of these effects. But it won't be the same sort of control where it's just like, and now stop. Everyone, you can't move, you can't use abilities, you can't do anything. It'll be much more granular and much more soft sort of control than that.
Will the support classes, there's some comparison here to Dark Age to help them understand. Will the support classes get group slots because of their speed songs, such as the Skald in Dark Age, or would they be more like a minstrel in Dark Age, which makes them viable without just their speed song?
That's a very hard question, because it was. I mean, I don't want to get into the old Dark Age mechanics of what's the difference between a Dark Age Skald and a Dark Age minstrel, but they generally should fill a group slot because they have useful utility. And as Mark said, they should have useful utility even if you're in a siege battle, which means it's not all about them running fast, which is why I don't like calling them speed classes, even though these are the classes that primarily give you speed. There's a lot more to them than that, so they should be worth a group slot even if you're not out running around.
Exactly, and that's why another reason why we can't and won't talk about it with the Skald minstrel from Dark Age of Camelot. It's really important to look at this game and to look at these classes, whether it is these support classes and other classes, and figure out how they factor into the game we're making today, which is an RVR PvP game. That's what it's focused on. And when you see a class reveal like this, look at all the things that, you know, and think about the things you're going to be able to do with a support class that's designed for RVR, not for PvE, not for RVR and PvE, for RVR.
Okay, does that make sense, guys? What kind of runes are the Skald going to use? Question there.
These aren't really runic-based characters. They're more song-based. And the songs obviously have magic components to them, so they'll have magic costs, and you'll have to have the same sort of similar mechanics to the way spells work, but they're kind of different in the way that they are these auras that are around your character that are persisting even while you're doing other things. And so, like, the Skald, for example, can have a song running. He's not, like, channeling to cast that the entire time. He just turns it on, and then he can be out using melee abilities while that song is running. So it's not exactly the same, and so it's not based on runes in the same way that magic is based on runes and memorizing things and charging your spell book and stuff. It's really a different mechanic.
Because this is an on-off ability, is there going to be constant blood drain?
Yes, there's going to be an upfront, like, startup cost when you turn these things on, and then there's going to be a persistent cost for maintaining it while it's running. Having the majority of the cost on the startup means that you won't want to be turning these on and off as frequently as possible to get all of the effects running. So you'll have to really make a choice of when you want to turn something else on, because there's a lot of that cost. But there is also a cost to having it running. So if you don't have one running at all, there's less cost, and you can use that to sort of recuperate a little bit better than if you were to just leave something on all the time. So it's not cost-free to have something on.
Yeah, it's about timing. I mean, you have to pay attention, as we've said about other classes, you have to pay attention to what you're doing. It's not just hit, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's not about starting, okay, guys, let's go out in the group, so I'm putting on all my auras, and I'm just putting on these other things, and let's just go running around. Yeah. Or let's go into battle, and you put them all on. You've got to be smart. You've got to play the game a little bit more intelligently than some other games.
Both the Viking and Arthurian speed breaks on damage. How can balance be maintained when the TDD speed does not? Does this allow them to run away if they want to?
Well, the TDD are kind of good at running away. Like,
oh,
God.
Oh.
And so what I mean by that, it actually is kind of true, because they're have this sort of skirmish play style where they want to get into engagements and be able to get out of them again. And so, obviously, this is just one implementation. This is a very limited set of sample abilities, so there will be more abilities than this. But this specific example was put in there to kind of illustrate that difference, in that, they will be taking a lot of damage if they keep this running, because it's a huge damage amplification debuff just from having this on. but it doesn't break. So if you're willing to take that extra damage, you could be in a bad situation and be like, we're not going to win this fight, let's get out. And so you can use that as sort of this extrication, sort of escape, disengage type ability, whereas some of these other effects aren't really good for that because they're only interested in getting you around the world or getting you into a fight before it starts.
And keep in mind, folks, when you're worried about guys getting out of range, remember the range of the abilities in our game. This is not like other games where, okay, you just move a little bit beyond and that's it, you're done. So maybe the TDD can run away a little bit better. On the other hand, that just gives more opportunities for you sharp-eyed Arthurians and Vikings to shoot him in the back.
Will these classes still be okay in solo play?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, some more than others, I think. Obviously, like the minstrel is going to have a little bit of a hard time, I think, as being like
Harder.
a total solo class.
I would say harder.
Yeah.
But when we've talked about mages, for example, as being hard in some ways to solo, depending, what your definition of soloing is, right? You could solo and be part and take part in a keep battle if you want. You're not really grouping with anyone. You're just going around looking for trouble. But if we're talking about soloing in the, hey, I'm just going to wander the world and look for things that are also looking for people who are wandering the world to fight, then I think these or that is harder than the Scald, but I think easier than some of the mages.
Oh yeah, well the Scald certainly I think is very viable as a solo character. Not as good as some of the other ones, but he's certainly above where like a pure healer would be. The Minstrel's probably below that because he doesn't have that sort of melee duality quite as much as the Scald has, a better melee capabilities because he's not using that instrument all the time, so he can have his weapons go.
Well, you don't mean worse than the healer, do you?
I don't mean worse than the.
Okay,
I just
because I think they might be thinking
the comparison between a minstrel and a Scald is the Scald is probably going to be better than the minstrel.
Correct.
Is.
But
the
better
minstrel
than a
is
healer.
probably going to be a little bit better than a pure healer because pure healers are obviously very focused on healing and very anti-damage. But I would say these are not the top end of solo classes necessarily, but they're somewhere in between. And the Dark Fool I think is going to be somewhere in between those as well because he's got some abilities that are very group centric where he needs to be supporting people in order to empower himself. And so if he doesn't have friends around, he's going to miss out on some of that. But at the same time, because he's sort of self-supporting and sort of has a bit of an anti group support, meaning like he benefits less from the group members around him doing things to him. He benefits from using his abilities and taking advantage of the group members around him. He can sort of do a little bit of that when he's on his own because he doesn't rely on people doing stuff to him. He can sort of power himself to some degree. So it is kind of nuanced and complicated, but the short answer is that these are not the top end of solo classes, and they're not the bottom end. They're kind of somewhere in between.
And keep in mind, folks, and we keep saying this when this sort of question comes up, our progression system is not like progression system in any other MMO. We've been really clear about that from the beginning, that you don't advance simply by killing people. So the question of whether any of these classes is viable in solo play is certainly a correct one. I have no problem whoever it was that asked the question. But remember, you can still progress in our game even if you're just going out and looking for trouble and helping when you can and doing some damage and hurting enemy, points of power, or doing things that hurt the other realms, even if you're not successfully killing other players. So you can benefit just by doing that. And that is, no matter what, one of the things that sets this game apart. And we knew this was going to be an issue, obviously, right from the beginning, is, how do you make all these classes viable in solo play and fit in the progression system? And the simple answer is they actually fit really well together.
From what I can see, supports have no healing. A question about self-heal, will they have any?
I think the Dark Fool actually does here, if you look at it.
Am I wrong?
They're more focused around resource manipulation than they are on healing. Obviously, we have pure healers, we have hybrid healers, we have a lot of people already doing healing. So I wouldn't consider this to be a very strong healing classes. They get a little bit of like maintenance because they're able to sort of help here and there and kind of keep things balanced out a little bit. But I wouldn't classify this as a healer or something you could take as that alternative to a devout or a pure healer in your group.
Oh, no way.
For the sake of healing.
Yeah, we can't do that. Well, even if we wanted to do it, we had already told the healers, right from the beginning that we were going to make our healing classes really useful, really powerful, and again, something that healers want to play. So if we made these guys too healing-centric, then that would be bad for the people who want to play pure healers, or of course the devout.
Will the Dark Fool have specialized face masks and staves/scepters?
If we can do it.
Do songs from different realms affect each other?
We would absolutely like that to happen. I mean, it's an ability.
It's part of the interaction system.
Yep.
And so there will certainly be abilities that have specific interactions built into them, so that they're supposed to affect each other. Even the ones that don't, a lot of the time you're going to have situations where you're doing an effect on your group and there's another support doing an effect on their group, and because they're overlapping but they're each affecting different targets, there's not a direct interaction there, except through the way that the players interact because they have those effects on them. So it's not quite the same as, two projectiles hitting each other and causing an effect. But there will be some cases where, you're doing a thing to enemies and their support is doing a thing to their allies, and so there might be some overlaps and some interactions there that could be interesting.
Will you be able to implement and play your own songs instead of standard songs?
We haven't even discussed that yet.
How will the instrument switch or weapon switch work in a fight? Can we swap without penalty?
Well, there will always be a penalty. The question is how severe of a penalty. I mean, we've said also from the beginning that you're not going to be pulling out new suits of armor. You're not going to be pulling weapons out of your backpack without a penalty. That just makes no sense for this game. Now, with weapons and instruments, it's really going to depend. Do you have a weapon ready in an area which is easy to get to? If it's sitting in your backpack, not going to happen.
I don't have the art in front of me. I think that Minstrel even has a weapon on his belt, so you can see that they're supposed to be able to have these secondary weapons. They're supposed to be able to fight when they get into trouble, but it's going to take time. You've got to put something away and get something else out. There's no instant weapon swaps. You're not going to be able to do these things that you see in a lot of other games where it's like, well, I'll bash you with my shield, then I'll instantly swap to a two-hander and hit you with that. Like, no, you've got to put something away and get it back out, and that's going to take time, and you're going to be vulnerable while you're doing that because you're not able to block. And so, yeah, there's going to be swapping of things, but you're going to really want those to be from your quick slot places on your character where you have these sheaths on your belt and stuff. You're not going to be going into your inventory and finding something to pull it out.
There is one, you're right.
There is one. Okay, good. I remember the picture.
Yeah. You mentioned mages have synergy when casting similar spells. Will support singing the same song amplify the song?
In theory, yes. We haven't talked about that, but, other than, I think, the most general way. The answer is yes, of course.
Can you describe a bit about the audio side of the support trio? Are you excited to feature realm-specific music, and how will it be relayed in the heat of battle?
By music? That's actually the answer. I wasn't trying to be snarky. That's how we want it to be relayed. I mean, that's one of the reasons we have DB, and I was spending the time on making this stuff really not just be playable in the game, but be part of the game. Mm-hmm. So yes, via music.
Yeah, well, I mean, and it's not just the sound aspect of it either, because it does need visual effects.
Mm-hmm.
You do need to be able to see how far does this reach from you. So there will be some music themed, effects that go along with this, so that you can see these things happening in the world, in addition to being able to have the audio happening.
Can you bash enemies with your loot on the head?
Yes.
Support classes, are they the first priority targets in fights, or will they always be at the bottom of the list?
I think that's sort of difficult to say. Support classes probably not going to be at the top of your priority list because they're not as direct of a threat. So if you're looking at who do we take out of this enemy group so that we can effectively clean up the rest of them, you're probably going to look at a threat assessment first. So support classes are going to generally have an overall cumulative effect based on the number of their group members are around. So they're kind of at their best when there's the most people around. So you might look at them as being one of the higher priority targets, but they're not going to have this tremendous burst like mages. They're not going to be the guy, keeping somebody alive forever as a healer. So they're probably not going to be the top of your list, but you might want to focus on disabling them and interrupting them and kind of taking some of their effectiveness away so that you can get on some of those other targets. So I would probably say they're probably not the highest kill target, but they're probably going to be someone you're going to want to devote a little bit of attention to as far as disrupting what they're doing, because their effects are actually really useful.
But that could also change depending on the group, right? So if you're attacking a TDD group that you think you have an advantage on, you may want to take the dog fool out of the mix quickly, because since they have speed that doesn't break. That if you can take that person out, this TDD group isn't going to be able to get away.
Yeah, they won't be able
quickly.
to escape because you've taken out their escape abilities. Yeah, so
Exactly.
So yeah, there's obviously situational. I think argument can be made for virtually any class of sometimes there's this guy who's really
Exactly.
important because it's in this one situation where you really need him to be dead so that they can't do something with him.
Exactly.
Do aura songs have cooldowns?
Do aura songs have cooldowns? There's cooldowns on virtually every ability, so that you can't just spam it over and over again. The songs have cooldowns slightly differently because they're from the end rather than from the beginning. So like when you cast, a fireball or whatever, the cooldown generally starts from the time that you start that ability, and then whether or not it finishes, that cooldown timer is counting down. But for songs, it's when it ends there can be a cooldown, and they're not always very long because there is sort of this twisting mechanic. It's not micro twisting where it's like, as Mark said, like 1 2 3 1 2 3. I really need to have all of these running at the same time, so I'm quickly swapping between them all. But it's not like you've used this song, you can't use it again for like 15 minutes. It's going to be fairly short cooldowns, just to sort of prevent this. Oh, I'm going to turn this off, do a shout, turn it back on again. You're going to have some choices, and we want you to be using more than one of these effects rather than simply picking the best one and sticking with it all the time.
The Dark Fool write-up mentions illusions. How much is the class focused on that as opposed to music, and will these illusions be physically represented in the game?
Well, we haven't gotten into actually doing illusion tech yet. But the idea is that if it's going to be a convincing illusion, it has to look like whatever it is, right? So if you're making a phantom character, or you're making it look like someone is something that they're not, then it has to change those models. It has to provide an effect that basically fools you into thinking it's something it's not. So we haven't quite gotten that far, and this is not a launch class for Beta 1. So obviously we're going to try and make some accommodations for this as far as we get into Beta 1 as a small aside, so that we have overworld speed without these guys. But once they get in, that speed will be transferred to these classes, but they're not going to be there at the start. So there's a lot of things that have to be worked out before these go into the game, and illusions, I think, are one of those.
Oh, absolutely.
Will any of these support effects be non-aura based or affect those out of a group?
Non-aura based, sure. I think there's a lot of examples of shouts in here already where you're doing a instantaneous effect that goes out and then either has an instant effect that's like, oh, well, I'm just doing a shout that just does damage or just increases stamina or something like that, or you're doing something that's a buff that lasts for a duration, but the shout happened and then you can go on to doing something else even though the buff that it applies persists over a period of time. And so not everything they do is an aura where they have to leave it running in order to have their effects happening on them all the time.
Can minstrels use several instruments?
Not at the same time.
Not that, no. That'd be kind of hard.
They could have them as they can have a sword or something. They could pull out a different instrument that would have different advantages and be better for different songs.
Well, how about that six-armed race we were talking about? Oh, just kidding.
Now that we have speed classes, does that mean mounts are out?
No, one thing has absolutely nothing to do with the other. I've talked about this on the forums, I know, and probably did the Kickstarter as well. Having a mount and having a speed class are not in any way diametrically opposed. I've been very clear that we can have both if we want, as long as the speed class, though, has the advantage. Right? If we first of all, we have pack animals. We've been incredibly clear about that. So in terms of those kind of mounts, Those are confirmed for the game. But we can have mounts and speed classes, because speed classes, as we've said right from the beginning, are not a one-trick pony. Sorry, you brought it up. But we can absolutely have mounts, and we can absolutely have speed classes, or in this case, support classes that have speed, because as we've been saying from the beginning of this reveal, these guys can do more than just speed. That's why we're designing them this way. So if we do decide to have mounts, that they can absolutely coexist together, where the support classes aren't going to feel like, well, you put in mounts, which means nobody's going to want me for my group for a group anymore.
Yeah,
and that is
if you
not
could have
the
a
case.
horse in your pocket that made you run as fast as support speed, then it would be making speed irrelevant.
Exactly.
But that we're obviously just not doing that.
Not going to do that. But we could have mounts, so when you're not in a group, so when you want to, just travel yourself, you can still have the advantage of faster travel without instant travel, without just sitting in, your town or your home going, I wish I had somebody here to help me get from point A to point B because it's a long walk. Well, that's a perfect time that you can have a horse.
Yeah, and even without mounts, we don't want the game to be painful without these guys.
Oh, exactly.
I don't want to make it sound like you must have one of these guys around, otherwise your overworld experience is just going to be awful.
Exactly.
Right? So you move at a reasonable speed. There are roads that you can travel along. There's going to be a lot of ways that you can mitigate the size of the large world even without having one of these classes around. But having mounts would be an additional step beyond that would allow you to have some greater mobility with a greater inventory for sure.
Well, the inventory is a big win.
Yes, then you would have just walking around with a backpack all by yourself.
Exactly, and we've talked about caravans where people are going to be shipping stuff from one area to the other, or yourself, if you want to help outside of a caravan, taking stuff to your own place, somebody else's place. Having a horse will be really useful because, after all, we have encumbrance in this game. Mm-hmm. So you can't just say, okay, I'm going to load up 50,000 pounds worth of bricks onto my back. You won't be able to do it.
Will the song's effects lessen over distance because music gets harder to hear?
I don't think any of the abilities right now have a distance fall for their auras. It's something that we could do because we do have that as a sort of effect of other types of abilities. But right now the effects are more over time based. There's some fall off, but not anything based on distances. Generally, the distances aren't too long versus the range of overall combat being fairly long. So you'll have to be relatively close to these guys in order to get their effects, which means they need to move around and make sure that they have coverage because their effects are going to be limited to the aura radius around them, which is not entirely, the entire battlefield. So they're going to have to keep their friends close to them if they want them to share their effects.
Yeah, that would make them too bottable too.
Yeah, because if you could just turn it on and then hide a guy in a corner someplace and then everybody's getting the effects, then their positioning doesn't matter and you don't even need to necessarily be there. And,
exactly.
There's some issues with that.
Does every realm have the same max speed?
Someone was asking if the Arthurians were going to have the appropriate noise for running. I have the coconuts.
So the sound effects
Tyler's sound
department
designer.
is doing that. Are we asking questions? What are we doing now?
Max speed.
The different max
the
speeds.
different max speeds. I think they're the same right now. Like, I don't think that a realm has a overall overworld travel speed advantage over another. Obviously, as I've said, these are samples. There will be more abilities, so there will be some advantages and disadvantages in terms of brief speed boosts that'll allow you to get a quick charge in, or as we've talked about a little bit earlier briefly about if there are some abilities that help you disengage or do an escape that might allow you to speed boost faster than somebody else in order to outrun them. There will be some trade-offs and advantages and disadvantages, and obviously component differences in the way that you construct your abilities and what how much cost you're willing to put. If you're putting a whole bunch of effort into making the speed really fast, it can be faster up to a point. So there will be some differences in practice, but as far as just overworld travel, if one realm can run across an island faster than another, they're really just basically the same.
Will these classes have any interactions with the Vox, since the Vox also produces sound music when crafting?
Haven't even talked about that yet. Good thought, but we haven't even talked about that yet.
Will sounds chants work through walls and rocks? Kind of covered that a little. Okay, I'm getting there. The Dark Fool abilities seem to scale a lot on the number of enemies around. Is this intended as a Zerg Buster class?
A lot of this ability is not even just with that one class, but with support in general, have to do with either being outnumbered or doing better when there's more enemies around. So that's it sort of is intended in that way, in that, you know, this isn't a class that's just good in a group versus group situation. They can be good in very large scale situations, but not just because they're providing buffs to all of your group members, but because they're providing debuffs that affect large numbers of enemies, and in fact get better when they're affecting large numbers of enemies. And so in a very large fight, whether it's a small group versus a large group, or one large group versus another large group, they're effective in cases where there are a lot of enemies to deal with.
Yeah, and I was waiting for this question.
Yeah, because that's something that obviously would come up.
Yeah, so who asked it? Jesse?
I scrolled well
They
past.
scrolled away.
So whoever asked the question, thank you for asking the question. Because we have talked about how we're going to deal with the Zerg right from the beginning of the Kickstarter, because it's really important. I mean, you know, we've seen, obviously, many years of history of people Zerging, whether it was in our game, Dark Age of Camelot, or, you know, Warhammer or other games such as ESO. And so having a class that can do things to harm big groups of people is a really important step, because we have to. Otherwise, you know, how are you going to fight the Zerg through abilities? You have to have a class or classes that can do things that will have a large effect, or have an effect, on a large number of people. And Ben and I have talked before about how the world is going to be designed and places of power and all that, but that's only part of the solution. And one of the other parts, because there's other parts as well, one of the other parts is having classes like these that have abilities that can really mess up a Zerg's day. And yes, this is one trio that we absolutely want to be useful and maybe necessary to dealing with the Zerg.
Zach, because I keep cutting your questions because you're asking multiple questions in one sentence. Pick one. I'm going to pick this one. How does speed work with roads?
So there will basically be a maximum overworld travel speed, and if you ever get a combination of things that would put you over that speed, it's basically capped and you can't go any faster than that, because engine reasons and gameplay reasons of, if you go faster than this, the animations don't work, and we just don't want you getting across the world this fast. And so there's going to be an upper bound. And so if you're using your bard speed, or your minstrel speed rather, on top of a road, then you might hit that cap and not being able to go any faster, whereas you'll get a large boost if you're off of a road, and you'll get a large boost from being on the road that would cumulatively have added up higher to that, but they get capped anyway because they've reached that maximum.
And we've talked about how a road is not a road. It is not simply the same road to every realm. So when you're within your own realm, you might cap out, but if you're on an enemy road, if we do what I hope we will do, which is have different effects of the road depending on which realm is using it, then having this class with you, even if you're going down an enemy road, is going to be a useful thing.
Yeah, having enemy roads and having ally roads, to, you know, roads being magic, world being magic, kind of is a contrivance that we use in order to facilitate some of these logistical things that will be important into the overall metagame.
Will people in a group that's greatly sped up by a support class receive damage when colliding with something?
Yes.
Okay, how does speed work if it is it out of combat only? How is it going to work with the combat toggle to change modes?
It is not out of combat only. There will be some abilities that might require you to be in a combat state. So far as like these charge abilities and things, you know, you can't necessarily do that when you're just running across the open world. But as far as just travel speed and running a travel song in travel mode, you can have abilities that require or don't require these modes. So not everything is available in one mode or the other, but some things are available in both, and speed is one of those things that you can do all the time.
Will the heaviness of armor affect the ability to play instruments?
Only in the way that it affects everything.
Mm-hmm.
So your armor contributes to your encumbrance because you're wearing these heavy things. Encumbrance contributes to your ability, preparation, and recovery times, and increases your costs for stamina and maintaining things. So it affects everything that you do, including your songs, but it doesn't necessarily have a direct correlation where it's like, if you wear heavy armor, you can't play a lute or something.
I think that will also depend on how far we go with different instruments potentially.
If you have to have a certain...
Well, for example, so let's say we wanted to add other instruments to the game, and obviously we have not taken these classes very far yet because they're not beta classes. But let's say we have plate armor, which restricts arm movement and restricts what you can do with different attacks. Then we might say that certain instruments that you're using might be affected.
Might not be allowed with
Correct.
heavy armor. Yeah, so that's a thing that we could do.
But we
it's
haven't
not on
yet.
the list right now.
Exactly, we haven't yet because again, not a beta 1 class.
Will there be a cap? Oh, will there be a cap to how many minstrels can team up together with harmonic intensity, so you don't end up with them buffing characters so high they end up one-shotting other players?
Yeah, absolutely. There has to be a cap. The whole game is based around the idea that you can't have abilities that one-shot people that make you so OP that it's silly. So whether it's a cap on the number of minstrels or the cap on the power of the ability that the minstrels make, it's the same with any class where you can team up. It'll be the same with magic. You can't have 8 mages in a group going, okay, now we're going to make a fireball that knocks a keep out in one shot.
Because it doesn't scale that high.
Exactly.
And a lot of the minstrel abilities won't scale that high either. And you can only have a group full of them, so it's not like you can get 100 minstrels together and play all the same thing.
But even if you could,
you
can't do it.
The scaling wouldn't allow that.
Exactly. And that's, again, really important in our game because we don't want the one-shots, because we don't want people to think, well, all I need to do is get a bunch of these guys together and we can wreak havoc on the game. Because we know if we didn't protect for that they would do it. I would too.
Can songs audio effects of support classes be ignored on a per player level in order to save oneself from song spam in trade or crowded places?
I trade?
I don't know what trade.
No,
trade
I know what it
hubs.
means.
I don't think that you can /ignore the sounds from a player. So if you're standing around town and a bunch of people are just deciding to play a song just because it's funny, I don't know how we'll... If that becomes a problem, we'll find a way to deal with it, but I don't necessarily think that's something we'll, by default, implement.
Will speed buffs work on caravans/NPCs?
They will benefit from them.
They have to.
Yeah, because it's an aura and they're friendly, and therefore they get benefits from those sorts of things. But it probably won't benefit caravans as much as it will benefit individual players. So you can hang out with them and make them a little bit faster, and that might help your escort mission, but it probably won't be just like, hey, now players are taking this giant cart and making it go at super speed.
Question about how many different types of instruments will be usable.
Don't know yet. Certainly at least one per class that uses an instrument. We honestly don't know. That's not something that we focused on so far.
Let's see. They keep talking about bagpipes on fire.
I don't think bagpipes is on our list, though. I don't
Not
think
yet.
we've put that on the list.
Yeah,
yet.
not yet. We'll see.
Will these classes be able to induce and remove panic?
Yeah, panic is one of the resources that sort of most all characters, at least player characters, share. And so dealing with panic is one of the things that support classes will be able to do, I think. And I think all of them are able to do that, actually.
Is there an estimated... Can the Darkful ridicule someone to death before its stun wears off?
I think ridiculing people is one of the sort of Dark Fool themed things, so that might be a fun.
Okay. Will songs be interruptible by the same abilities that interrupt spells?
Yes. So songs obey the disruption system so that you can disrupt a song that someone is playing, and in fact, that's kind of the only way to get rid of them. Unlike regular buff, where like you can actually purge a buff off of an enemy with an ability that does that of the same type. But if you're trying to get rid of a song effect, you can't get rid of it on the person that it's affecting. You have to get rid of it on the person who's making that song effect happen. And so you do that by disrupting the support character and then making the song stop, and then it stops for everyone.
There are a lot of questions about CC. Is this the CC trio class that is going to be focused on that? So I'm just going to summarize that.
Well, we already covered the CC thing a little bit.
But they keep
This
asking.
is not the control trio. This is the support trio. They have effects that make allies better and make enemies worse, but they're not specifically focused on hard control, on like, you know, making sure that, you know, now you can't do anything, or now, you know, we'll just stop you all and then pick you off one by one. It's more of like, you know, they can have a powerful effect that makes everyone's abilities take longer, or makes everybody's abilities cost more, or makes everyone slow down, or makes everyone speed up, or, you know, any number of these other effects of like, this is bad or this is really good, but they won't have a lot of generally hard control effects where it just completely negates your ability to fight back in all ways.
Okay, everyone okay? This is a support class. Everyone okay?
Are they?
He's like, is this the class with the CC? We must know. Okay. Keep asking. You have about 2 minutes left, so I'm looking for some really good last questions to finish up on. Can we get Pity the Dark Fool tank top?
That'd be a great poster.
Will instrument quality affect the strength power of songs or ours, or just they need any instrument?
Yes.
Yeah, an instrument is analogous to a weapon for these characters. For the ones that use them, for the ones that don't, they're more based on voice, which is the same way that fighter shout voice works. They don't have a itemization basis for those abilities. They have an itemization basis for their other abilities.
Since players will have different speeds, when in a group under speed, will all speeds be normalized?
If I understand the question, yes. So like, it will help you keep up with your group when you're doing overland travel, so that you're not, you know, giving everybody an unequal amount of speed boosts, and therefore some slow guy can't keep up because he's not getting as much of the buff as somebody else is getting, because characters get different amounts of the buff. It will basically make it so that you can all travel together as a group.
Ben said realm members would benefit since they are allies. Does that mean the songs are realm AoE target in general?
I don't know what I said, but they're generally group-based, not realm-based, so that you won't be able to play a speed song that speeds up your entire, you know, massive Zerg and makes them all run at super speed. It's based on
Anyway,
each individual group.
Let Ben repeat that again. Very important. Go ahead, man.
So you can't speed up your whole Zerg. You can only speed up your individual group, so that if you have a whole bunch of groups and they each have a support character, that support character is affecting each group. Not all the support characters are affecting all of the other cross groups.
Really important.
Okay. I think it's about time. Looking for a last question. You guys know the answer to some of these. Okay. Will instruments degrade over time like weapons and have to be reforged?
Yes.
Yeah, they're analogous to weapons. So
Yeah,
you can
just
think
think
of them
of-
as being the same thing.
Exactly. I mean, for every class, we've said this from the beginning, there has to be a way for crafters to be involved. If crafters, whether you're a minstrel or whether you're a mage, if you don't have to buy anything from the crafters, then you have an advantage over the other classes. And it doesn't matter whether your itemization is weapons or armor or instruments
Or spell books.
or spell books. Everything has to tie into the economy. If it doesn't, we've just shot ourselves in the foot and made the crafters like really unhappy. So yes, it doesn't matter. Armor, weapons, instruments, spell books, all craftable.
Okay, last two questions, because these are kind of interesting. Can you use music to help destroy buildings faster?
I don't think there's any instrument to building interactions.
Not so far.
Not that there
Good
couldn't
question,
be,
though.
but
Good question,
they're-
but just like the Vox question, we haven't even, talked about this yet.
Question about a scald, and can they be shut down if you just have someone basically bash them in the head, because that's they're focusing.
Yes, that
Yeah.
is kind of their weakness. So
Yeah.
if you do head target abilities against a Scald, they will be unhappy.
Okay. Okay, 4 o'clock, everyone. Thank you for your questions. And I guess we will move to closing section now. And hopefully you'll join us next week for another...
Jesse, thumbs up, thumbs down?
Oh,
as
yeah.
usual?
Oh yeah, we have to
What
know.
do you guys think of the support class? Do you thumbs up? Thumbs down? Neutral? Zach has already started. Oh, D for now.
Already campaigning.
Already
Of course.
campaigning. Thumbs up. Thumbs up. Thumbs neutral. Thumbs up. What's not to like? Good. Yay, okay. Looks pretty positive so far. And
Cool. So, again, I thought this was a really interesting and fun reveal.
Yeah.
I think this is a great trio. Once again, non-mirrored, very different play styles from the three, different support classes. I think there's a lot of fun and interesting stuff here.
Yeah, I think these will be another of these characters that if you are typically playing a healer in your MMOs and doing healing in PvP, you might consider playing this as an alternative to a healer, as a supporty sort of class where you're not necessarily focused on killing people, you're not worried about as much of the offense as you are on defense, because it's sort of splitting a bit of that role of like where healers usually handle all of the buffing and debuffing and cleansing and healing. Our healers are going to be split their focus between, curing wounds and healing body parts and doing a lot of other things because healing is more complicated, and these guys are going to be focused more on the buffing and debuffing and some of these other elements. So it kind of splits that role a little bit to where players who are used to healers that do one of these things and not both of them could kind of choose either one of these ways to go. So it might be something for you who are used to playing healers to look at as maybe a different alternative if it's a style that you like more.
Exactly. So, guys, as always, it's Friday, so a survey is going to go up, the next one. We're down to 3 more trios, so that will be going out in the next few minutes. An update as well going out shortly. Well, not too shortly because I haven't written it yet. So I'm going to be actually writing it now. I know we have some good art to show off. We've got some other things to talk about. So everything is great. I mean, everything is moving along really nicely. We had another good week. The store is up and running, and again, so far, no issues. Anything you want to talk about?
Well, I guess we've got these 3 more, and all 3 of them are ones that I thought would have been picked earlier.
Yeah, me too.
They're all super
Yeah.
interesting,
Yeah,
and
me too.
no matter which one you pick next week, it's going to be a really good stream to watch, I think, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, Ben and I spent a good portion of today reviewing the last 3, getting them all set for final. So we won't have to do what we've always we were doing in the beginning with them. So I'm really excited about all 3 of them.
Yeah, definitely.
They're going to be very fun reveals. Very fun. So even though Sacrix is voting for D, feel free to vote for anyone. They're all good. There is nothing bad, nothing even mediocre or meh in the next 3 reveals. We expect there'll be, at least with some of them, a bunch of talk.
Yeah.
Bunch of talk. Can't wait. Will be fun. So see you guys, in a couple hours with the update. In terms of testing tonight, don't know if we're going to have anything this weekend. We've been working, as I said in the announcement yesterday about the live stream, we've been focused very heavily on some interesting stuff like auto scaling and improving the performance of our proxies and our mini servers. So we're not sure we're going to have a test up, but we might. We still have 2 hours, maybe 3.
What was it we told Mark
7
Hernandez
hours
earlier?
is
Was
Yeah.
just like, just get it in by the end of the day on Friday, and then...
Exactly. Just see what happens, because it would be just an alpha and IT test. This wouldn't be an FNF. So depending on what happens over the next few hours, we may have it open. Certainly the auto scaling stuff is really cool, and the performance increases we've gotten on the proxies as well is pretty cool. So, we'll see what happens, and that's it for now.
And if you want to talk more to Ben and MJ and ask some more questions about the support class, there's going to be a thread up on the forums very shortly, so you can give us your feedback and your thoughts on it and ask any extra questions that you didn't get to ask here. And yeah. All right. And for you, Ibsen, this is not the best video in the world, but it is a tribute. Have a good weekend, guys.